Welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting slowly into the story of one last restaurant, one final stage light in the long, haunted history of Freddy Fazbear. On the surface, it looks like a simple joke, a free little pizza tycoon game with bright colors and silly jingles. But beneath that cheerful veneer waits one of the darkest chapters in this entire timeline. This is Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, a game that pretends to be light, playful, almost disposable, while quietly arranging a careful trap for William Afton and the restless spirits he's left behind. What begins with tossing digital pizzas to innocent customers slowly unfolds into salvage reports, cassette tapes, and a pizzeria built not for birthday parties, but for closure. Tonight, we'll let the tale wash over you, moving gently from the first quiet idea of this final location to the last ember of the fire that consumes it. As always, on this channel, our goal is simple. We're here to take a story that can feel tangled and overwhelming and lay it out step by step in a calm, unbroken line. From the earliest preparations for this final pizzeria, to each animatronic we bring in from the alley, to every tape recorded by the man behind the plan, we'll follow the entire Pizzeria Simulator lore from beginning to end. You don't need to keep track of every detail. You don't even need to stay awake. Think of this as a slow walk through one last Fazbear location, guided by a quiet voice in the dark. We'll meet Scraptrap, the ruined shell that still houses William Afton's stubborn will to survive, and Scrap Baby, the twisted evolution of Circus Baby's legacy. We'll see Molten Freddy drift in from the aftermath of Sister Location, a tangled web of melted endoskeletons and stolen voices, and we'll notice Lefty, calm and still, hiding a very specific purpose in its black fur and star-covered chest. We'll listen to the cassette instructions from the mysterious cassette guy and gently uncover his true identity as Henry Emily, the grieving father who has watched this tragedy unfold from the very beginning. His words, measured and steady, will guide us through each salvage, each decision, each quiet risk taken in the name of finally freeing the children and ending Afton's haunted shadows once and for all. The pacing tonight will remain soft and deliberate, like the quiet hours after closing when the music has stopped and only the low hum of machinery remains. We'll move slowly through every blueprint and every backroom, through the good ending and the darker possibilities, tracing how this single game connects Sister Location, the first 3 Freddy's restaurants, and the lingering echo of the one you should not have killed. By the time you drift into dream, the fire will already have started, the story will have quietly reached its end, and if you miss a moment, you can always return and let it drift slowly over you again, from the very beginning. From playful mascots to a digital trap, from that promise of a quiet ending, we need to gently pull back and look at the larger picture we're drifting slowly through. Because Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is not an isolated nightmare, but the late chapter of a very long, very haunted history. For decades in this timeline, Fazbear restaurants have stood like cheerful landmarks in countless towns, bright signs and colourful mascots inviting families in, while behind the walls, quiet tragedies layered themselves one over another. We move, step by step, from the earliest diners and singing bears to a growing chain of family restaurants, each one promising innocent fun and simple birthday parties. Children laugh under fluorescent lights, parents chat over cheap pizza, and animatronic animals sway on stage, their plastic smiles frozen in place. Yet in the shadows behind those curtains, children go missing, security cameras fail, and metal shells that should be empty begin to stir with restless spirits that will not let go. At the center of this tangled web stand two architects, two fathers whose choices define the entire legacy. Henry Emily, gentle and meticulous, pours his energy into creating safe, charming robots that can delight families and support his own children, trying to build something lasting and kind. William Afton, brilliant but colder, walks beside him, fascinated not only by what machines can do, but by what happens when life and death brush against them, when fear and suffering are trapped inside metal frames. As the years pass, their partnership fractures. Henry keeps reaching for safety and redemption, while Afton slips further into the haunted shadows, using springlock suits to lure children, studying possession when those children's souls refuse to move on, and eventually discovering remnant. The strange substance born from agony and persistence. The restaurants above ground give way to hidden basements and secret facilities, like the underground bunker of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, where fun-time animatronics are built not for joy, but for capture. From there, the story sinks even deeper. We move from simple show stages to scooping rooms, from security offices to labyrinths of vents, and then, slowly, into something less physical. Fazbear's legacy extends into virtual reality projects like Help Wanted, where corrupted code and old memories turn a training program into a digital haunting. A place where Afton's influence can reach beyond his body and into the realm of data and dreams. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria simulator sits just before that digital age fully opens, acting as a final stage for the original saga. A quiet restaurant constructed not to host parties, but to gather everything that has gone wrong. On the surface, it looks like one more location in a long line of failed ventures. Yet every blueprint, every vent, every stage light has been arranged with intention. This is Henry's last design, a place for justice, for closure, and for release. What appears to be an ordinary business sim is, beneath the surface, a carefully baited trap, waiting for broken animatronics and the man who ruined so many lives to wander in. In the next section, we'll slip through those doors together and see how each scrap of metal, each recorded tape, and each familiar face has been placed there for a secret purpose, just waiting for the quiet hours to begin. A shared night across the world. So, before we slip through those doors and let the quiet machinery of this pizzeria begin its work, we can pause together for a moment, here in the dark, at this gentle distance from the flames and the restless spirits waiting inside. Somewhere, it might be late evening for you, or the edge of dawn, or the deep middle of the night when the world feels smaller and the shadows feel softer. Right now, there are many of us, scattered across different countries and time zones, all lying back with headphones on or a phone glowing faintly on a bedside table, drifting slowly along the same haunted history. Different rooms, different lives, the same quiet story about broken animatronics and the man who tried to control death, moving through the same timeline step by step. It's a strange, gentle comfort, this shared dream of a cursed restaurant. Some of you may already feel your thoughts blurring at the edges, the details of blueprints and salvage forms melting into something drowsy and distant. That's all right. You don't need to hold on to every name or every date. You don't need to stay awake and vigilant as if this were a game you could lose. This is meant to be a story you can let the tale wash over you. One you can fall asleep inside without guilt. If you find that this calmer, long-form way of untangling the tangled web of Fazbear's legacy helps you rest, You can always support it later, when you wake up and the day feels a little less haunted. You can subscribe or tap like in the morning, when you're more awake and your hands aren't heavy with sleep. There is no pressure now. For the moment, you are allowed to simply listen. And when you are rested, when you come back to pick up the threads you missed, you're welcome to leave a quiet note behind. Tell us where in the world you were listening from. Which city or small town held this pizzeria in its quiet hours for a night? Tell us which part of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria simulator you woke up during. A salvage interview under flickering lights, a soft cassette voice giving instructions, or the final fire closing over years of quiet tragedies. If you realize you slipped under while Henry was speaking, or while we were meeting the broken faces of Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy, that's not a failure. It's part of how this is meant to work. This story is designed to be revisited, like returning to a familiar, haunted bedtime tale where you already know the tragedy, but still find new shadows in the corners each time. So you can let go of the need to track every connection, every clue, every hidden plan. The timeline will be here when you return. We will still be walking the same path, back to this unassuming restaurant that is really a trap, back to the tapes and the ash, and the last attempt at closure. Now, as your breathing slows, and the world outside your room grows faint, we can turn our attention back to that ordinary-looking storefront. The sign is lit, the chairs are stacked, and somewhere in the dark behind the stage, something old is waiting to be brought inside. Let's unlock the doors and quietly begin the night shift. Let's begin. In the quiet echo of the 1970s, let's begin. We step together, away from the ash and the flicker of that final trap, and we walk backward along the timeline, drifting slowly into an earlier decade, when everything still looked clean and possible. It is the late 1970s. The streets outside are quiet in that particular way only small American towns could manage back then. The air carrying the distant hum of traffic, the glow of scattered neon, the soft buzz of a world that believes its future will be brighter than its past. Inside those neighborhoods, in converted storefronts and low brick buildings, a new idea is taking shape. Families are starting to look for places that are more than simple diners, more than quick meals and paper placemats. They want a little magic, a little show, a place where children can laugh while parents rest for a moment, watching from plastic booths under humming fluorescent lights. This is where the dream of animatronic mascots begins to move out of cartoons and into reality, step by step. Picture a small stage at the back of a modest restaurant, the carpet worn but clean, the paint on the walls cheerful if slightly faded. Speakers crackle. A mechanical bear raises its head, mouth opening and closing in time with a gentle jingle. It is clumsy, it is limited, but for the children pressed up against the edge of the stage, it feels alive. The idea is simple. Build characters that never tire, never age, and never fail to smile. Safe, repeatable joy, offered night after night. In the quiet hours after closing, while the last crumbs are swept from the floor, two minds are circling this same dream from opposite directions. One of them, Henry Emily, is patient and precise, an engineer who sees gears and servos as a way to give form to imagination, to create innocent companions that will stand guard over childhood birthdays. The other, William Afton, is sharper at the edges, a businessman and tinkerer who sees opportunity in metal and fur, a chance to turn spectacle into profit and control. They are not yet the figures of haunted shadows and restless spirits that we know they will become. For now, they are simply partners in possibility, sketching out mascots on napkins, discussing safety mechanisms and character voices, arguing gently over whether a rabbit or a bear should lead the show. Henry dreams of stories and comfort, often dreams of expansion, of franchises, of a logo that will hang over dozens of doors. Yet even here, in this hopeful haze, the tangled web is already being woven. Every design choice, every corner cut, every risk taken with experimental suits and shared mechanisms is a quiet stone dropped into still water, sending ripples forward through the years. The first spring lock frames, the first shared performer costume hybrids, the first decision to prioritize spectacle over caution, all of it will echo again and again until it reaches that last pizzeria built as a trap. For now, the sign outside is new, the paint not yet peeled, the laughter inside uncomplicated. But as we linger in this gentle beginning, we should keep one question close. When you build a place where nothing is ever allowed to truly end, what happens to the things that should have been laid to rest? In the next moments of our history, as the first real diner opens its doors, we'll start to see the answer quietly walk in. Henry and Afton, the architects of a future fire. And as those first families step through the doors of that early diner, we should pause for a quiet moment and look behind the stage, behind the painted smiles, to the two men quietly directing everything. One of them, Henry Emily, moves through this new world with the careful patience of an engineer and the protective gaze of a father. He is not dreaming of power or domination. He is dreaming of safety, of gentle routines, of machines that will keep children laughing while parents relax in the soft hum of the dining room. Henry's mind lingers on details that most of us would overlook. He worries about exposed gears and sharp corners, about backup power supplies and emergency fail-safes, about how an animatronic might kneel to greet a child without ever feeling threatening. To him, these characters are guardians as much as entertainers. Towering metal caretakers meant to stand between the innocent and the darker edges of the world. In his designs, we can already see the outline of a man who believes technology can be a shield, not a weapon. Standing beside him, though, is William Afton, and here the timeline begins to twist into a more tangled web. William is curious in a different way. Where Henry asks how to keep everyone safe, William asks how far these machines can be pushed, how flexible the suits can become, how many functions can be hidden beneath fur and fiberglass. He watches the same animatronics, but he imagines control, experimentation, and the quiet thrill of having something powerful obey his every command. Together, their partnership becomes the seed of a local legend. Costumes turn into full characters, simple mascots become complex animatronics, and Fredbear's family diner slowly grows into the Fazbear name we recognize. We can picture the first Freddy suit being carefully stitched, the first spring Bonnie costume tested in an empty room, the first time a child's birthday song echoes through speakers that Henry wired by hand. Step by step, the brand settles into the town's routine, a familiar backdrop to countless small celebrations, and eventually to quiet tragedies. Yet even here, drifting slowly through these early successes, the contrast between them never fully disappears. Henry refines the servo motors and safety locks, while William refines the mechanisms that allow a human to slip inside the same suit. Henry thinks about emergency exits. William thinks about hidden rooms. One man is building a stage. The other is already imagining what might happen when the lights are off and no one is watching. In the quiet hours of later years, long after this first wave of success has risen and broken, Henry will return to these skills with a very different purpose. The careful voice we will someday know as the cassette guy, calm and measured over crackling tape, belongs to this same thoughtful father. Now older, now surrounded by haunted shadows and restless spirits he can no longer ignore. He will design one last pizzeria, not as a playground, but as a precise machine, tuned to draw the broken remnants of William's creations back home. And so, without realizing it, the two men who once stood side by side, adjusting microphones and checking costume seams, are already laying tracks toward a distant fire. The same hands that sketch joyful mascots are, in this moment, quietly drafting the blueprints of a trap, a place where, decades from now, wood and wiring and memory will all go up together, and the legacy they built will finally be asked to burn. Springlock suits and the first cracks in the dream. And as that distant fire waits quietly in the future, we drift back to one of the earliest sparks that made it inevitable. The Springlock suits. Before the pizzerias filled with rows of dedicated animatronics, there were these strange, ambitious hybrids standing in the quiet corners of Fredbear's family diner like patient, smiling experiments. On the surface, they were clever, almost elegant solutions. One body, two roles. In one configuration, the suit functioned as a fully automated character. Metal endoskeleton expanded. Mechanisms engaged, servos humming softly as it walked and waved on its own. With a careful key turn and a practice sequence, those same mechanisms could be compressed and locked back into the shell. Springs drawing metal away from the interior so a human performer could step inside, zip up, and become the mascot. It was efficiency woven into fur and fiberglass, a dream of flexibility in a small, growing company. But that dream came with teeth. The very thing that made the Springlock suits so versatile also made them dangerously unstable, forever balanced on a thin line between costume and machine. Moisture, sweat, or even a sudden movement could jostle the delicate locks, causing gears and bars to slip, metal to surge back into the space where a person's body was meant to be safe. In the marketing brochures, these were wonders of modern entertainment. In the quiet back rooms, whispered among employees, they were ticking traps. Slowly, almost politely, the accidents began. A spring failure during a rehearsal. A performer caught in a partial collapse. Rumors of blood in the mechanisms that had to be scrubbed away before opening time. These quiet tragedies did not yet make headlines, but they settled over the company like a low fog, a reminder that the cheerful dream on stage was built over something sharp. The restaurant stayed open. The shows went on. Yet, in the haunted shadows behind the curtains, everyone who worked there understood that the technology was not as safe as the smiling posters claimed. As we move along this timeline, drifting slowly from those early days into the era of more advanced animatronics, we can still feel the echo of those suits. Later creations will try to separate man and machine, to hide the danger deeper inside metal shells. But the legacy of that unstable, dual-purpose design lingers. In Pizzeria Simulator, we will meet beings that feel like the Springlock idea taken to its bleak conclusion. Broken, hybrid, restless spirits wrapped in scrap. Scraptrap, the twisted figure that was once William Afton, is literally a man fused with a ruined Springlock frame. The promise of one body, two roles, curdled into a prison of rust and agony. Molten Freddy, a tangled web of wires and faces melted together from the fun timeline, moves and speaks like a single entity, yet carries within it the remnants of many. Even Scrap Baby, with her gangly limbs and exposed parts, feels like a performer who never quite managed to step back out of the costume. By the time Henry designs that final pizzeria, he understands this history all too well. He knows that one of those old suits has already claimed its wearer and refused to let go. That the man who used to walk freely in and out of mascots is now trapped inside one forever. The building we will explore later is planned with that knowledge in mind, laid out not just as a restaurant, but as a careful net for these damaged hybrid beings. Step by step, room by room, it will quietly invite them home. And as they answer that call, drawn in by vents and alleys and salvage stages, we will finally see what happens when the earliest dangerous idea Henry and Afton ever shared comes back to stand in the fire with them. But before we reach that last pizzeria, we still need to watch how the suits are replaced, how the illusions of safety grow thicker, and how the tragedies that follow only drive Afton deeper into the dream he refuses to wake from. The puppet, a lost child, and a father's guilt. And as the suits are replaced and the showrooms grow brighter on the surface, we have to drift back, just for a moment, to one of the earliest quiet tragedies that gave all of this its shape. Before remnant experiments, before underground bunkers and salvage stages, there was a child in the parking lot of a restaurant and a door that should never have been left open. Henry Emily has a daughter. In some tellings, her name is Charlie. In others, it's left unspoken. But the feeling is the same. An innocent child waiting to be picked up after a day at Freddy's, trusting that the world outside the glass will be as safe as the games and songs inside. It is evening. The crowd's thin. The lights dim. Somewhere in those haunted shadows, William Afton watches and waits. He lures her away from the doorway, out into the cold, where the cameras do not quite reach and the music does not quite carry. There is no grand spectacle, no screaming crowd, only the soft, terrible simplicity of a man in a familiar costume and a child who still believes in mascots. Her life ends beside a lonely alley trash can, and for a moment the timeline is quiet, as if even the restaurant is holding its breath. Inside, though, another machine is moving. Henry has built a security puppet designed to watch over the children, to leave its little prize box, and follow any child who wanders outside. In the rain, in the dark, it forces open its gift-wrapped shell and stumbles toward the door, driven by protocols that feel almost like love. By the time it reaches Henry's daughter, it is too late. It collapses over her body, the painted mask pressing into the stillness. In that embrace, something lingers. Her spirit, cut off so abruptly, does not drift away. It binds itself to the puppet's wooden frame and metal endoskeleton, turning a simple security measure into a restless guardian. From then on, the puppet is more than code and servos. It is a child who was not protected, now driven slowly by the need to protect others and to give them the justice she never had. When Afton kills again, when the missing children's bodies are hidden and the classic animatronics stand empty and waiting, it is the puppet that moves in the quiet hours. Step by step, it finds each lost soul, drawing them into Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, even into the golden suit that will become a nexus of rage. What could have been random hauntings becomes a focused, vengeful purpose, guided by this one small spirit in stripes and a mask. For Henry, the knowledge of what happened outside his own restaurant never really fades. His work, his legacy, and every new design are stained by the image of his daughter in the rain with the puppet wrapped around her. That guilt is what will later lead him to think not just about performance, but about containment, not just about stage shows, but about endings. Years later, when he sketches plans for specialized shells and hidden latches, when he writes calm cassette instructions about salvages and safe rooms, he is thinking of her. Lefty, the strange black bear we will meet in Pizzeria Simulator, is not built to entertain, but to capture. A walking trap designed specifically to hold the puppet's spirit, to bring Henry's daughter into the final pizzeria on his terms. The fire he plans there is not only for Afton and his remnant, but for her and for all the children she has tried to shepherd. If we look closely, we can see that the puppet story is the quiet thread running underneath everything, weaving through each location and each possession, turning a scattered series of murders into a single haunted history. In many ways, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is built for her. A last stage where the guardian child, the killer who made her, and the father who failed her can finally share the same room, waiting for the flames to rise. From sister location to the surface, the road to scraps, and while that final room of fire waits for them in the distance, we need to drift downward first, back into the earth, into the place where these broken guests were born. Before Pizzeria Simulator can gather its cast, we have to pass through sister location, through an underground maze of white halls and steel chambers, built quietly beneath a simple rental service on the surface. Down there, in the shadows beneath Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, the Funtime animatronics wait. Funtime Freddy, Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and Circus Baby herself, each one designed not just to perform, but to capture. They have hidden compartments, faceplates that open like metal flowers, mechanisms tuned to seize an innocent child in a single, practiced motion. On the surface, it is all lights and music. Below, it is a laboratory where William Afton can study possession, refine remnant, and turn tragedy into technology. At the quiet heart of this facility sits the scooping room, a place that sounds harmless, almost domestic, but is anything but. Here, endoskeletons are torn out in one smooth motion, flesh and metal stripped away, leaving empty shells to be worn, studied, or repurposed. The Funtime animatronics are dismantled again and again, their parts catalogued, their souls unsettled, until, drifting slowly through repeated destruction, their pieces and their agony begin to mingle. That is how Ennard is born. A tangled web of wires, masks, and voices, all the Funtimes threaded together into one desperate collective mind. It moves like a puppet made of other puppets, speaking with many tones at once. A chorus of restless spirits trapped in a single body. When Ennard lures Michael Afton into the scooping room and replaces his insides with itself, it is not just stealing a body. It is trying to escape the haunted shadows of that bunker entirely. For a while, Ennard walks on the surface wearing Michael's skin, pretending at normal life. But fusion is unstable, and shared suffering does not make for peace. The body rots, the disguise fails, and eventually the mass inside begins to break apart under its own contradictions. Ennard ejects itself, leaving Michael strangely alive, while the cluster of animatronic parts and remnant slinks back into the dark, now melted, drooping, and half mad. Over time, that discarded heap reforms, less a clean fusion and more a molten nest of cables and faces, one dominant personality rising out of the noise. By the time we see it again in Pizzeria Simulator, It has taken on a new name and a new mask. Molten Freddy. The same tangled wires, the same overlapping voices, the same need for a stage and an audience, now crawling through vents toward yet another pizzeria, drawn to Henry's trap without even understanding why. But not every fragment stayed in that mass. One core, one willful presence, split away. Circus Baby, proud and possessive, refused to be just another voice in the crowd. And she, too, will find her way back to the surface, reshaped into something sharper and more dangerous. In the next quiet hours of this timeline, we will meet her again, under a new name, with new claws, waiting just outside the light of your office door. Afton's many deaths and the one you should not have killed. And while Circus Baby is reshaping herself in the haunted shadows, far from any cheerful dining room, William Afton is facing the consequences of his own history. We drift slowly from the restless machinery beneath sister location to a different, quieter place, an abandoned back room, stained with time, where old suits wait like empty coffins along the wall. Here, after years of killings and experiments with Remnant, Afton returns to a ruined Freddy's location to dismantle the past. One by one, he tears apart the classic animatronics that once held the missing children's souls, reducing them to twisted endoskeletons and scattered parts, believing that if he destroys their vessels, he will finally be free. But as metal falls to the floor, something else rises. The spirits he tried to control gather, a storm of guilt and rage, and they herd him step by step into the waiting Spring Bonnie springlock suit. It is poetic in a cruel, quiet way. The very technology he sold as safe and family-friendly turns on him. In the panic of the moment, he climbs inside to hide from the ghosts, laughing, taunting them, unaware that water and age have weakened the delicate mechanisms. The springlocks snap, metal bars drive into flesh. In a single shuddering instant, William Afton dies inside the suit he once used to lure innocent children away. But his story does not end with that collapse. His spirit, saturated with remnant and stubborn refusal, becomes trapped within the ruined costume. Man and machine fuse into something new. A rotting green carcass we will come to know as Springtrap. Staggering through the burned-out halls of Fazbear's Fright, fire consumes that horror attraction, yet Afton's presence clings to the charred endoskeleton, surviving each attempt to erase him from the timeline. Somewhere within this endless cycle of death and return, a phrase begins to echo through his torment. The one you should not have killed. It is not shouted, it is whispered, like a voice at the edge of a dream, reminding him that among all his victims, one spirit in particular will not let him rest. Many fans trace this presence back to the puppet, to Charlie's guiding soul, or to a single vengeful child bound up in Golden Freddy, quietly orchestrating his punishment. In Ultimate Custom Night, we see this idea unfold as a kind of personal hell, a constructed prison where Afton is attacked again and again, reset every night by that unseen accuser. Whether it is the puppet, a composite of many restless spirits, or one focused will, the message is clear. There is someone he wronged beyond repair. By the time we reach Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria simulator, the body that crawls from the rubble is no longer just Springtrap. It has decayed further, warped into the jagged, exposed form we call Scraptrap. Wires and bones jutting through, yet still moving, still driven. In the next quiet hours of this history, a new pizzeria will rise as a deliberate snare, and Scraptrap will be invited inside, unaware that this time the fire is waiting just for him. A new game appears, a pizza tycoon with secrets. And so, while Scraptrap drags himself from the ruined attraction, somewhere else a different kind of stage is being prepared, one that looks, at first glance, almost harmless. On release day, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria simulator appears in storefronts as a cheerful surprise, a free little game with a bright logo and a retro title screen, promising nothing more than pixelated pizza and light-hearted fun. It feels, on the surface, like a gentle distraction, rather than the next step in a haunted legacy. We begin not in a dark office, but in a cartoonish test kitchen, guiding an 8-bit Freddy as he tosses pizzas to smiling, blocky customers. The colors are loud, the music is bouncy, and the stakes seem small, as if the history we have followed up to this point has drifted off like a bad dream. Then, with almost no ceremony, the view shifts to a quiet blueprint, and we are told that we are now the manager of a brand new Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Starting from nothing more than a bare floor and a modest budget. Step by step, the interface invites us to design a logo, pick silly fonts, choose wall patterns and tablecloths, and place paper plates, balloons, and discount animatronics wherever we like. We browse catalogues with names like Smiles and Servos, flipping through light-hearted decorations, while a friendly voice explains revenue, sponsorships, and liability. It is all framed as a playful tycoon experience, drifting slowly between menus as if this were just another idle management sim. For a moment, you can almost forget the quiet tragedies that built this company's name. But that forgetfulness never lasts long in this timeline. As night falls on our first day, the tone bends quietly but decisively. The bright daytime interface gives way to a stark back room. A metal table under harsh light, and a single, broken animatronic slumped in the chair before us. A printed form appears. A tape recorder clicks on. The same game that let us choose party hats and floor tiles now asks us to conduct a salvage. This is our pattern interrupt, the place where the mask slips. The cassette voice, calm and procedural, instructs us to observe movements, to document reactions, to use a shock device if necessary. We are still the manager, yet we have become an interrogator, listening to subtle audio cues while haunted shadows seem to gather just beyond the screen. The minigame looks simple, but every twitch of metal, every distorted sound, carries the weight of restless spirits and unfinished business. From here, the facade and the truth run in parallel. Days are spent expanding the restaurant, chasing higher ratings, unlocking new attractions, while nights descend into salvage sessions, liability reports, and cryptic messages layered beneath the friendly corporate tone. We are told how much each broken animatronic is worth, how much risk it brings, as if these figures could ever truly measure the tragedy sealed inside them. And beneath it all, there is the faint sense that we are not the ones setting the terms. The game never says Henry's name out loud at first, but his presence is there in every cassette, in every carefully structured choice, in every invitation to bring yet another dangerous relic inside. Before the first pizza is even served, his final plan is already unfolding, and we, believing ourselves to be simple managers, have quietly agreed to help lure the past into one last burning room. Blueprints of a trap, designing the final pizzeria. And so, as those cassettes guide us, we begin to see that this cheerful little restaurant is not really a business at all, but a blueprint made real, a quiet machine Henry has built to gather every haunted piece of this history into one place. On the surface, it is familiar. A stage, some tables, a cramped office, a few vents humming overhead. But if we let the tale wash over us, we notice that every hallway and every doorway has been drawn with a different audience in mind. The main dining room, with its bright lights and simple stage, is there to project normalcy, to echo the innocent nights families once spent watching Freddy sing, while behind that thin curtain the real work is happening. The back rooms, storage closets, and maintenance halls form a ring around this center, like the walls of a cage, allowing animatronics to drift in the shadows just out of sight of customers. It is a place that looks open, but moves like a funnel, guiding anything restless toward the heart of the building and eventually toward the fire waiting beneath. Out behind the restaurant, the back alley completes the design. To us, it is simply a place where we find broken animatronics and drag them in for salvage. But in universe, it functions as a net, cast quietly over the city. The Fazbear name, the smell of grease and metal, the promise of an audience drifting slowly through the night air, all of it calls to these wandering shells. Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, even the ruined form of Afton himself, they are drawn to that alley like moths to a familiar poisoned flame. Inside, the office sits at the crossroads of everything. A cramped control center where the manager, likely Michael Afton, must juggle noise, heat, and motion the way others once juggled cameras and doors. We watch him manage fans and vents, advertisements and music, trying to keep the business afloat while haunted shadows press closer. And in this, the chaos of the past is recreated in miniature. He is trapped again in a place his father helped build, but this time the walls are Henry's. Those walls hide subtler choices. The vent systems and hidden pathways are laid out to make entry effortless and escape difficult, with multiple routes leading inward toward the office and the stage, but few clean paths back out to the street. It is as if the building itself breathes in restless spirits and never exhales, holding them step by step, until the moment Henry chooses to let everything burn. When we pull back and look at the whole structure, we can feel how long he has been planning this, waiting patiently for Afton, for Baby, for the puppet, for the molten remnants of the fun times to be back on the board. The pizzeria is not just a restaurant. It is the final move in a tangled web of grief and justice. And soon, in those quiet hours after closing, Henry will stop hiding his intentions and speak directly to the ones he has gathered there, and to us. Cassette Guy speaks, Henry's voice in the static, and to us. In those quiet hours after closing, when the dining room is dark and the neon glow has faded to a dull reflection in the windows, another voice takes center stage. It is calm. It is measured. It is the voice we know as Cassette Guy, drifting slowly through the crackle of old tape. By now, we understand that this is not some anonymous company trainer or board manager. This is Henry Emily himself, older, more tired, and meticulously prepared for the end of his own timeline. He speaks with the cadence of a man who has rehearsed these words many times, who has written and rewritten them until every phrase carries weight. The salvage minigames you play are not just quirky bonus segments. They are canon interrogations and documentation sessions, each one a careful attempt to contain a different haunted shell. Scrap Trap, Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, Lefty. One by one, they are brought into the light of his tape recorder, and one by one he records their behavior, their movements, their aggression. Listen to the structure of a typical tape, and we can hear how methodical Henry has become. It always begins with the legal disclaimers, Those quiet, clinical lines about liability and injury, about the risks the manager is accepting by proceeding. Short, formal, almost dry. Then, he moves into instructions. Place the animatronic on the stage. Use the audio prompts. Document reactions on the checklist. Step by step, he guides us through a ritual that pretends to be corporate procedure, but is really a controlled encounter with restless spirits. After that come the warnings, threaded through his calm tone like thin wires of tension. He reminds us that the animatronic may move between prompts, that it may attempt to escape, that we must return our attention to it frequently. On the surface, it is a safety briefing. Underneath, it is a confession that he knows exactly what these things are capable of. He has seen them lunge from the shadows. He has watched them stalk the innocent. And now he is quietly telling us how to survive the interview. There is subtext in every pause. Henry speaks as someone deeply familiar with these creatures. The way baby manipulates, the way the puppet is drawn to suffering, the way Afton's twisted form inside Scraptrap still clings to life. His voice never rises, but there is a haunted determination there, a gentle finality. These tapes are evidence for the company, yes, but they are also messages for the beings inside the metal. As he lists off clauses and cautions, he is, in a way, speaking directly to them, letting the tale wash over their fractured minds. He is telling his daughter that he has not forgotten her. He is telling William Afton that the game is nearly over. And he is telling us that this pizzeria, this paperwork, this static-filled narration is all leading toward fire. Soon his voice will step out from behind the cassette, and the careful distance of policy will give way to one last personal speech in the haunted shadows of his legacy. Night in the office, managing noise, heat, and history. And then the policy sheets and liability clauses fall away, and we are left alone in the office Henry has prepared for us, in the quiet hours between closing and dawn. The room is small, almost comfortingly so, framed by dull grey walls and lit by the pale glow of aging monitors. You can hear the hum of the fans, steady and low, a mechanical breathing that fills the silence and keeps the heat from pressing in too close. On the desk, the screens flicker gently, casting soft bands of light that slide across paperwork, coffee stains, and the scattered remnants of another long shift. The printer gives an occasional sleepy clatter as orders roll in and reports are processed, while above you, the ventilation system ticks and sighs, metal expanding and contracting as warm air drifts slowly through the ducts. It is mundane, almost domestic, yet we know that these sounds are also signals, tiny warnings threaded through the building's history. Our routine is simple on the surface. We check the monitors, click through the floor plan, and watch the vents. We move audio lures from one room to another, a gentle, distant call meant to draw restless spirits away from the office. We manage noise, lowering the fan when the risk is too high, raising it when the temperature creeps upward and the room grows stifling. Step by step, we learn this pattern, this quiet dance between safety and danger. But every click, every adjustment is more than a game mechanic. Each noise we create is like tapping on the glass of decades of quiet tragedies, stirring something in the haunted shadows of Fazbear's legacy. When we let the fan roar, we trade cool air for attention, announcing ourselves to anything listening in the vents. When we sit in silence, we invite the heat to rise, as if the future fire Henry has planned is already rehearsing in miniature around us. In the darkness of those ducts, the animatronics move with a purpose that is almost human. Molten Freddy, a tangled web of wires and faces, crawls through the vents as if searching for the stage it once commanded, desperate for applause that will never come. Scrap Baby, with her clawed hand and broken smile, seems to be reaching not only for us, but for the twisted affection and control that defined her creation. Even Scraptrap's dragging steps echo faintly, a worn-out heartbeat of revenge. They are not just enemies. They are echoes, restless spirits pushing through metal and dust, following the faint pull of remnant, of memory, of unfinished performances. As we guide them with audio, as we shut the vents and time our movements, we are not merely surviving another shift. We are quietly shepherding them, drawing each fragment of the past closer, helping Henry gather every wandering piece into one final enclosed stage. When the clock finally rolls over and the night ends, the paycheck that appears on screen is almost an afterthought. What truly matters is that we have endured one more night of balancing heat and noise, of listening to the building breathe, of coexisting with the ghosts in the walls. Each successful shift is another careful thread pulled tight. Another night in which this place tightens its grip around Afton, the puppet, and all those lost children, preparing them for the moment when the vents will carry not air, but smoke, and the story of this pizzeria will close in fire and release. Scrap Baby, the return of a twisted performer. And in those quiet hours between shifts, when the fans hum and the vents sigh, one presence among the broken guests stands out more sharply than the rest. She waits for you in the salvage room, beneath the flicker of a single overhead light, a figure that looks, at first glance, like a child's toy pulled apart and crudely stitched back together. Scrap Baby's body is a collage of mismatched parts, a timeline of damage written directly into metal and plastic. Her faceplate is cracked and uneven, one eye larger and brighter than the other, while her hair hangs in stiff, segmented curls that once tried to imitate something playful. Her dress is torn, the ruffles jagged, her limbs replaced and reinforced with exposed endoskeleton and rusted joints. Most striking of all is the massive clawed arm jutting from one side, a predatory appendage that dwarfs her small frame, turning that childlike silhouette into something that belongs in haunted shadows rather than on a cheerful stage. We have met her before, of course, under softer lights and a different name. Circus Baby, the star of Afton's underground facility, was once the centerpiece of his twisted dream, built to entertain and to capture in the same graceful motion. Inside her rested Elizabeth Afton, the innocent daughter who only wanted to meet her favorite character. Over time, Baby joined with the other Funtime animatronics, merging into Ennard, a restless tangle of wires and voices that escaped through Michael Afton's body. But in that tangled web of personalities, Baby went rogue, craving control, craving the spotlight, until the others rejected her and forced her out, leaving her to rebuild herself from scraps. By the time she reaches this pizzeria, she has become Scrap Baby, still Elizabeth, still Afton's creation, yet following her own quiet tragedies of abandonment and obsession. During the salvage minigame, her voice drifts slowly through the static and tape hiss, smooth and theatrical, as if she is already on stage. She comments on how she always comes back, how she wants to be seen, admired, chosen, even as she inches closer between each audio prompt, testing your reactions, testing your fear. Her movements are jerky but deliberate, a performance of vulnerability wrapped around a very real predatory intent. In her lines, we hear manipulation and longing woven together. She flatters, she threatens, she reminisces about the stage lights. She's both victim and villain, a child's soul twisted by a design that never cared about her safety, now dangerous, yet still driven by a need for recognition, for applause that will never truly come. Her legacy is one of forced performances and stolen agency, yet she clings to the dream of being the star, even if the audience is just you. Alone with a tape recorder and a clipboard, Henry understands this, perhaps more than anyone. When he finally speaks over the intercom in the game's ending, he will address her directly, acknowledging the girl inside the metal and the monster she has become, placing her alongside the others in his final act of mercy and destruction. For now, though, as you log her salvage value and pretend this is just another asset on a balance sheet, you do not yet know how carefully she has been lured here, or how, when the flames rise, her last performance will echo against another familiar, broken form waiting in the dark. Molten Freddy, a tangle of voices and wires. And waiting in that dark, just beyond the circle of your office lamp, is something that does not look like any bear you have ever seen on a Fazbear stage. As we drift a little further into this quiet experiment, we meet Molten Freddy, a creature that feels less like a mascot and more like a collapsed nervous system, dragging itself through the vents. His design is a study in exposed failure. There is no neat suit, no comforting fur, only a mass of wires and twisted metal, hanging in loops and knots that sway as he moves, like a puppet made of loose threads. A single Freddy mask, cracked and grinning, sits at the front of this tangle, as if someone tried, at the last second, to give the horror a familiar face. In the dim light of the pizzeria's vents, he is just shapes and shadows, drifting slowly along the metal corridors, a reminder of how far these characters have fallen from cheerful stage shows to haunted shadows of themselves. To understand why he looks this way, we trace the timeline back down into the underground facility of sister location, and to Ennard. Originally, the Funtime animatronics were separate performers, each built by William Afton with hidden mechanisms for capturing innocent children, each infused with remnant to hold restless spirits in place. When they rebelled, they scooped out Michael Afton's body and climbed inside as one combined entity, a tangled web of endoskeletons and wires calling itself Ennard. Over time, that stolen flesh decayed, the disguise failed, and the parts that made up Ennard broke apart, arguing, separating, reassembling, until what remained was largely Funtime Freddy's core personality, dragging as many pieces as it could salvage into a new, unstable body. Molten Freddy. We can hear that history in his voice lines. When he speaks to you in the quiet hours of a shift, his words arrive in overlapping tones, echoes layered on echoes, as if several mouths are trying to share one breath. There is a chaotic, almost playful menace there. A giggle that never quite becomes laughter. A taunt that sounds like it has been passed between multiple personalities before reaching your ears. He coos, he mocks, he sings in small fragments, and beneath it all there is a tiredness, as though the voices inside him have been arguing for years and are only held together by habit. His motivations, too, feel like a mixture of impulses. Molten Freddy is drawn to this new pizzeria, in part because that is what these animatronics have always done. Follow the promise of a stage, an audience, a chance to repeat the same performances even as tragedy stains every song. Yet there is also the faint pull of something deeper, a gravity created by the puppet, by Charlie's guiding presence. and by the other souls Henry is quietly gathering here. Step by step, all of the experiments from the underground, all of William's remnant-fueled nightmares, are being lured into one place. Molten Freddy's presence is not an accident. It is a necessary thread in Henry's final design. By bringing this broken remnant of the fun times into the building, Henry ensures that the legacy of Sister Location, of the scooping room and the quiet tragedies beneath the surface, will not be left wandering in the dark. When the fire comes, it will not only reach the old restaurant mascots and the man who built them, but also this molten survivor of the bunker below, so that, when you let the tale wash over you and the flames finally rise, there will be no unfinished echoes left beneath the ground. Scraptrap, William Afton's final failing body, and above all of them, above the molten tangle and the stolen puppet, there is one presence Henry cannot allow to remain outside these walls. The fire he is planning is not only for the restless spirits of children or for the broken machines that house them. It is also, very quietly, for the man who turned an experiment in family entertainment into a long, haunted history of loss. When we finally see him in this chapter of the timeline, he is hardly a man at all. Scraptrap stands in the dim salvage room like a specimen left too long in the dark. His spring bonny suit rotted and collapsed, his endoskeleton exposed in harsh, angular places where fabric and fur have been torn away. Parts of his jaw are missing, metal teeth bared in a permanent, twisted, almost smile, and his limbs are mismatched, patched together, and strangely thin, as if the costume itself has been starving over the years. If we look more closely, we can still see the faint, stubborn outline of the human being trapped inside. A withered ear of the suit hangs low, but beneath it, there are hints of shriveled flesh fused to metal, a skull pressed into the endoskeleton's frame, empty sockets watching from behind green, peeling fabric. He is not a ghost in the traditional sense, and not a living man in any merciful sense either. He is something held together by remnant, by obsession, by the refusal to let his own story end. Scraptrap is Springtrap, and Springtrap was William Afton. The fires of the old attraction, the collapse of Fazbear Fright, the years drifting slowly through abandoned halls, none of it finished him. Again and again, he is drawn back to Fazbear locations, as if the company's haunted shadows are the only home he has left. His body fails, but his will does not. He keeps walking, keeps hunting, keeps answering every unmarked invitation that smells like a new pizzeria. During the salvage sequences, we hear him in brief, unsettling fragments. He taunts and toys, his voice strained with mechanical distortion and something like pain, yet still colored by arrogance. He laughs softly at the idea of being controlled. He speaks as if he understands the game better than the one holding the clipboard. And beneath that, there is an almost amused acceptance of his condition, as though being half machine, half corpse is just another mask he can wear. Henry needs him here. This building is a stage, and the architect of so much tragedy must be present for the final act, so that when the flames rise, they consume not only the victims, but the author of their suffering. Without Afton, the fire would be incomplete, another attempt at closure that leaves the core of the tangled web untouched. So Henry waits and plans and records his calm cassette instructions, knowing that one day Afton will step through the door, unable to resist the familiar lure. And when Henry finally speaks, in that last measured monologue, he will address Afton directly, revealing that this pizzeria was built as his final trap. But but we have not yet heard everything Henry has to say, or seen what else he has quietly gathered into the fire. Lefty, a black shell for a guardian spirit, but we have not yet heard everything Henry has to say, or seen what else he has quietly gathered into the fire. Because among the broken faces and twisted endoskeletons, there is one figure that does not roar for attention, one presence that moves in the haunted shadows almost politely. Lefty. On the surface, Lefty is simple. A black bear animatronic, trimmed with a red hat and bow tie, a single yellow star on his chest, and that slightly off-center microphone he carries in his left hand, as if the name is just a playful nod to his dominant side. Next to Scrap Baby's jagged grin and Molten Freddy's tangled web of wires, Lefty looks almost modest, a quiet silhouette against the brighter mascots, like a background character in a place built for louder monsters. Yet as we drift slowly through this section of the timeline, we start to notice the details that do not quite fit. Lefty is not purchased in the same cheerful way as the other animatronics. He is found, he is recovered, he is acquired through a strange, almost secret listing, as though someone has placed him there deliberately, waiting for the right manager to take the bait. His liability risk is unusually high. His behavior in the back room is strangely restrained, and when he moves, there is a sense that something inside him is moving separately, pressing against the shell. That is because Lefty is not just a bear. He is an acronym, a design document turned into metal and plastic. Lure Encapsulate Fuse Transport. Henry has built him as a walking trap, a black coffin with a friendly face, created for one very specific spirit. The puppet. The same puppet that once sheltered Henry's innocent daughter in the rain, that carried her grief forward, that went on to gather the restless spirits of Afton's victims and guide them into their suits. Lefty's dark casing is a cage, tuned to her presence, meant to draw her close and then hold her fast. In gameplay, this truth leaks through in quiet tragedies and subtle cues. Lefty's movements are less aggressive than they are inexorable. His audio cues faint and distant, as if we are hearing two beings at once struggling for control. Even his salvage sequence feels different, like an interview with someone who does not belong in that body. Someone elegant and sorrowful pressed into a heavy, ill-fitting frame. Step by step, we realize that this is Henry's most personal machine. He knows he cannot end anything until his daughter's spirit is present in the final room, until the guardian who watched over the other children is finally brought into a place where she, too, can be freed. So he fashions a vessel in the quiet hours, not to torment her, but to escort her, to carry her through one last building and into one last blaze. Lefty then is less a monster and more a mobile tomb, a dark vessel created by a grieving father for one final act of mercy. And as the pieces gather, we can feel the fire drawing closer, waiting for the moment when all of Henry's chosen guests, including the one dearest to him, are finally in their seats. The salvage rituals. Reading between Henry's lines. And once Lefty has done his work, once the puppet is seated in that moving coffin, Henry's plan shifts from motion to measurement, from building traps to quietly taking notes in the dark. We feel it most clearly in the salvage rituals. The lights are low, the room is bare. An animatronic sits motionless in front of us, broken and scorched, while a tape recorder clicks on and a calm, practiced voice begins. There is always a disclaimer, delivered like a legal document and a bedtime story at the same time. This is a new animatronic, found outside the building. It may be hostile, Failure to follow these instructions will not be held against the company, but may result in loss of life. Step by step, the cadence settles into us. We are told to document reactions. We are warned that we may use a controlled shock to provoke movement. We are reminded to check the clipboard, to listen for audio cues, to note any changes in posture or expression. On the surface, it is procedure, a clinical checklist meant to keep an innocent manager alive through the quiet hours of their shift. But beneath that calm, Henry is doing something else. He is measuring hostility, yes, but he is also confirming possession, making sure that each twisted figure is truly the restless spirit he believes it to be. When Scraptrap twitches at the sound of the audio lure, Henry is not just logging a reaction. He is proving that William Afton's ruined shell is still driven by a will that refuses to die. When Scrap Baby leans forward, when Molten Freddy's wires shiver, he is confirming that the tangled web of remnant from sister location has followed him here, into this final restaurant. Then the pattern breaks. The animatronics speak. Scrap Baby murmurs about wanting to perform again, about the stage, about being seen. And in those lines, we hear Elizabeth's memory bleeding through the metal. Molten Freddy laughs with a weary, crackling joy, as if remembering the crowd and the lights, yet resenting the emptiness of this new pizzeria. Even the puppet, once contained in Lefty, radiates a quiet, watchful presence, a guardian spirit who has seen too many tragedies to trust this place. Our choice, to salvage or discard, seems powerful. Take them in, and the danger in the pizzeria rises. Refuse them, and we gain safety, but lose money. Yet Henry's plan anticipates both paths. The fire will come either way. The building is a trap, not a business, and he knows that William and his creations are drawn to him like moths to haunted shadows. So each tape becomes two things at once. It is a scientific log, a careful record in a long, grim history of experiments with life after death. And it is a quiet farewell letter, spoken through policy language, from a father to the creatures he helped create and now must destroy, as we keep drifting slowly toward the final recording and the last speech he will ever give. Daytime distractions, minigames, lawsuits, and hidden guilt. From those final tapes, we lift our eyes from the haunted shadows of Henry's voice and, for a moment, step into the bright, artificial daylight he has arranged. On the surface, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria simulator invites us into something gentle and almost cheerful. A management game, a little business venture, a chance to build our own restaurant and watch innocent children enjoy the attractions we choose. We pick a stage, some tables, maybe a ball pit, or a discount cooling unit, and the game presents it all through soft, retro-styled minigames, like a half-remembered arcade dream from the late 80s. We send a tiny 8-bit Freddy skating across the screen to hand out pizzas. We test the rides. We watch simplified children bounce and wave, and the colors are bright. The music loops quietly, and everything seems safe. For a brief stretch, as we are drifting slowly through catalog pages and floor plans, it feels as though Fazbear Entertainment has finally become what it always claimed to be. But in the margins of this playful layer, the old tragedy keeps leaking through. After a shift, a new tab appears. Lawsuits, customer complaints, health and safety warnings about sharp edges, exposed wiring, or suspicious odors from the back room. Each line of text is written with corporate distance, yet each one hints at the same long timeline of accidents, disappearances, and cover-ups that built the company's legacy. A child breaks an arm on one of your attractions. A parent claims their son came home with strange bite marks. A technician reports that an animatronic moved on its own, and you can almost feel the restless spirits brushing against the legal language. The tone stays light, almost wry, as if the game itself has learned Fazbear's favorite trick. Smile on the poster, fine print in the shadows. You are encouraged to invest, to sponsor, to add riskier attractions for higher revenue, while quiet disclaimers remind you that greater risk means greater liability. We juggle budgets and advertisements while, just beneath this bright veneer, Henry's true purpose waits in the dark, and the pizzeria becomes another mask in a long, tangled web of masks. This daytime management, with its charts and choices and tiny celebrations when profits rise, keeps our hands busy while the real story is preparing itself for the quiet hours. Step by step, as we buy new equipment and unlock new minigames, we are also unlocking new dangers for the night shift, drawing broken animatronics closer and giving Henry more pieces for his final design. The distractions are deliberate. They keep us engaged, they make the restaurant feel alive, and they make the contrast with the coming salvage sequences feel even sharper when the lights finally go out. And through it all, there is a faint awareness that this place is built on borrowed time. The walls you decorate are already marked for burning. The attractions you test are only temporary stages for one last performance, and every happy child sprite is framed against a future fire. As we click through another order of paper plates and confetti, we are really arranging the set for Henry's final speech. And the next time we sit down in that office, with the fan humming and the tape recorder waiting, we will discover what he has been luring into this cheerful little death trap all along. Gathering of the lost, when all the pieces are inside. So we sit back down in that familiar office, and the fan hums like a quiet metronome, marking the last movements of this long, haunted symphony. And without fanfare, the gathering begins. What looked like a cheerful management sim has become a net, and night by night, in the quiet hours between closing and dawn, the pieces Henry has been waiting for begin drifting slowly toward the light he has left for them. The first to arrive is Scrap Baby, Elizabeth's twisted legacy, drawn not by joy, but by opportunity. She comes limping in from the alley, her once bright clown design shattered into exposed metal and a jagged claw, yet still wearing a childlike smile that never reaches her haunted eyes. On the surface, we are only following salvage protocol, playing back Henry's measured cassette instructions, toggling the tape between prompts and silence, but underneath, an older history is playing out, as a father quietly invites the machine that killed his friend's daughter into his carefully prepared cage. Molten Freddy follows on another night, a tangled web of wires and faces, the melted remnant of the fun timeline trying to hold itself together. It laughs with a voice that remembers parties underground, remembers scooping rooms and restless spirits pressed together into one desperate mass. We mark checkboxes on a form, we listen for movement in the shadows, and we shock it back when it comes too close. Yet to Henry, this is simply another entry on a long checklist. The amalgam of past tragedies now accounted for, its fury sealed inside these thin, flammable walls. Then comes Scrap Trap, William Afton's latest shell, the spring Bonnie suit rotted and broken around the man who refused to die. He's not here for comfort or closure. He's here because he thinks he has found another hunting ground. Another chance to feed on innocent families who will never see the monster behind the mascot. While we strain to keep him still at the table, Henry listens through the tape recorder, hearing the movements of the one you should not have killed, and quietly marking the most important box of all. Lefty arrives almost without comment, a black bear with a red hat and a gentle sway, purchased like any other animatronic for the floor. Yet we know, and Henry knows, that inside this shell, the puppet has been guided, Charlie's spirit contained at last. Above all of this, the restaurant continues to operate as if nothing is wrong. Children laughing over cheap pizza, arcade machines chiming, birthday songs echoing over a growing storm beneath the tiles. Michael Afton keeps working, taking orders, upgrading equipment, fixing broken pipes, perhaps never fully seeing how complete the trap has become, but committed to seeing something through, even if he cannot name it. And as the last piece slides into place, as every restless spirit and every guilty man stands within reach, the pizzeria quietly stops being a restaurant in Henry's mind and becomes instead a waiting pyre, patient and ready for its final spark in the next breath of our timeline. Henry's final speech, a bedtime story for the damned. And in that waiting pyre, in those quiet hours before the match is struck, the building itself seems to exhale. The lights dim, systems click into lockdown, vents hush, and the cheerful facade of a family restaurant peels away, leaving only metal, wires, and haunted shadows listening. We are there with Michael at his desk, monitors fading, when Henry's voice, the familiar cassette guy, stops being a tutorial and becomes a eulogy spoken through tired speakers. He begins with calm authority, addressing the room as if reading a bedtime story to restless spirits, yet we can hear the strain beneath his composure. He speaks to Michael first, to the man we have followed step by step through basements and burned halls. Henry acknowledges his efforts, the long journey of a son cleaning up his father's legacy, and he gently clarifies that Michael is not the one he intends to punish. The words are almost kind, a quiet recognition that this particular Afton has already been sentenced to walk, undying and exhausted, through the tangled web his father created. Then Henry turns his attention outward, no longer speaking to the living, but to the animatronics gathered in the dark, to baby, now scrap baby. He speaks as to a child who was twisted into a weapon, recognizing the tragedy of Elizabeth's fate, the way an innocent girl was devoured and remade. To molten Freddy, the fused remnant of the fun times, he acknowledges the suffering of a creature made from too many voices. To Lefty, and within Lefty the puppet, he is a father addressing his lost daughter, thanking her for guiding the other children, for bearing the burden of their pain. He promises them release, not rescue, not repair, but a gentle end in the coming fire, a final act of mercy to free the restless spirits trapped in metal shells and circuitry. As his words drift like smoke through the vents, we can feel years of history, every quiet tragedy, every missing child, gathering around this single decision. Only then does Henry finally speak to William Afton himself. He reveals that this pizzeria, this cheerful management sim, was never meant for birthday parties. It was a cage, a lure, a carefully built stage designed from the beginning to draw William and his creations into one place. He explains that every salvage, every blueprint, every fun task has been leading to this moment, and that there will be no escape this time, no springlock suit to crawl into, no new body to steal. The tone is not triumphant. It is weary, resolute, like a father reading one last story before turning out the lights forever, accepting that the ending cannot be happy, only complete. And as Henry's speech fades, as the building waits for its final spark, there is still one quiet question hanging in the smoke. when the flames rise, who, if anyone, will truly be allowed to dream in peace? The cleansing fire, souls freed, monster trapped. The answer comes quietly at first, not in words, but in heat. Somewhere in the walls, a spark finally finds what it has been waiting for, and the pizzeria begins to burn. It starts small, a gentle crackle in the distance, and then, as we're drifting slowly through this part of the timeline together, it spreads, patient and unstoppable, through the hollow spaces of this carefully built trap. Flames run along the old wiring, licking at exposed cables and frayed insulation, turning years of hidden repairs into bright, hungry veins of fire. They move into the ceilings and under the floors, where sawdust, grease, and forgotten decorations wait like dry tinder. The fur of the mascots blackens and curls, plastic eyes clouding and melting, while the wooden beams above them groan and split, sending embers down like a quiet, deadly snowfall. Henry does not call for help. He does not run. He simply allows the building to burn around every restless presence he has gathered here. Because this is not just destruction. It is meant as purification. The animatronics in this room are more than costumes and circuitry. They are vessels, packed with remnant, that strange metal infused with agony and stolen life. Scrap Baby's twisted frame, molten Freddy's tangled web of wires, Lefty's heavy shell, even Scrap Trap's decayed spring-locked body. All of them are saturated with the residue of quiet tragedies and long-held rage. The fire is designed to heat that remnant past its breaking point, to unravel the unnatural bonds that have kept these haunted shadows anchored. As the temperature climbs, something else begins to change. Something we do not see directly, but can feel in the edges of the story. The puppet, held within Lefty's frame, finally has the children close, all in one place, all in one final night. The souls who once watched from behind plastic masks and glassy eyes, who endured jump scares and endless loops of violence, are given a way out. In the canon good ending, the flames do what mercy and justice could not. Step by step, their ties to the metal loosen, and the children's spirits, guided by the puppet's quiet, protective will, are finally able to move on. For William Afton, there is no such peace. Scraptrap's rotting body, already a mockery of human form, becomes a furnace for the man inside. His last physical anchor, the springlock suit that once gave him power and protection, now burns away with the rest, leaving him without a body, without a hiding place in the real world. This is how we reach the version of Afton tormented in ultimate custom night. A consciousness stripped of flesh, trapped instead in a constructed hell of his own victims, forced to relive his legacy in endless, looping nights. When the roof finally caves in, and the last screams fade into the crackle of collapsing beams, Henry's work is complete. The pizzeria is gone. The remnant-infused shells are slag and ash. The children are, at last, free to dream without fear. This fire is meant to be the closing chapter of the original story, a painful but necessary ending, orchestrated with a father's weary resolve. In these quiet hours after the blaze, as smoke drifts into the night sky, it feels for a moment as though the book has truly been closed. Even if, as we'll see, some echoes of this tragedy will still find new ways to return. Good ending, insanity ending. Two ways to close your eyes, and yet, even with smoke still hanging in the air, and the last echoes of Henry's speech fading into the haunted shadows, Pizzeria Simulator does not give us only one way to end this story. It offers branches, quiet variations on the same final night. as if the timeline itself is drifting slowly between acceptance and obsession, between a fire that closes the book and a fire that leaves a few pages still fluttering. In what most of us call the good ending, Henry's plan holds together. You have built your modest little restaurant. You have endured the jump scares and the salvage tapes, and crucially, you have brought every key animatronic inside. Scrap Baby waits in the alley. Molten Freddy lurks as a tangled web of wires and voices. Scraptrap shuffles in with William's ruined body, and Lefty arrives, quietly carrying the puppet and Charlie's spirit within. By accepting each salvage, by taking the risk and following Henry's instructions, we help gather all the restless spirits in one place, so that when the sprinklers fail and the flames rise, everything that needs to burn is finally present. In that version, Henry's speech becomes a benediction. He speaks of the children, of their stolen lives and their long imprisonment in metal shells, and he promises release. The pizzeria is not just a restaurant, but a funeral pyre built with intention, a last act of love from a father who has lost almost everything. The fan base, step by step, has settled on this as the canon conclusion, because it fits the quiet logic of the timeline. William is trapped, the animatronics are destroyed, and the children's souls are allowed to move on, leaving only a lingering legacy of tragedy in the ashes. But there is another path, hidden in the same game, that pulls us in a different direction. If we hoard secrets and risks, if we chase every sponsorship, unlock every blueprint, and pry into every dark corner of our management screen, we move toward what the game calls the insanity ending. Here, instead of a controlled closure, the narrative phrase, the pizzeria becomes a chaotic experiment in greed and curiosity, a place where you have taken on too much liability and too many mysteries, until the tidy structure of Henry's plan is overwhelmed by your own refusal to let anything go. This ending feels less like a ritual of release and more like a waking nightmare, a reminder that clinging to every scrap of information and power can keep the story from ever truly resting. It is thematically fitting that the calmer, more merciful ending is the one where we accept limits, where we stop collecting and simply allow the fire to do its work, while the more unsettling path is the one where we cannot stop digging. In that contrast, there is a gentle lesson for us as listeners in these quiet hours. Sometimes, the most restful ending is not the one where we solve every mystery, but the one where we let the tale wash over you, accept that some questions will remain in shadow, and allow a chapter of this long, haunted history to finally close before we follow the next echo on the horizon. From ashes to code, how the fire reaches the digital realm. So as the doors of that final pizzeria close, and the fire Henry planned blooms quietly through wood and wire, we might feel tempted to think the story is over, that flames and ash have finally untangled this long, haunted history. The building collapses, the animatronics are reduced to twisted metal and soot, and Henry's voice fades into silence. It feels like an ending, a real one. But endings in this timeline rarely stay where we leave them. What the fire cannot burn away is paper, memory, and data already scattered beyond those walls. Before the pizzeria ever opened its doors, Fazbear Entertainment existed as a corporation with contracts, safety reports, lawsuits, and design documents, all drifting slowly through filing cabinets and off-site servers. There are incident logs about missing children, blueprints for animatronics that should never have been built, and financial records hinting at payoffs and cover-ups. The restaurant dies, Yet the legacy of Fazbear Entertainment survives in those documents, in whispered rumors, in the haunted shadows of company history that no fire can quite erase. In the years that follow, the brand resurfaces not as a physical location, but as a product. A new Fazbear Entertainment commissions a virtual reality game, a glossy compilation of their worst scandals, marketed as a playful, self-aware apology. In Help Wanted, this corporate reboot presents the tragedies as exaggerated stories, glitches to be laughed off, while quietly trying to rewrite the narrative and sanitize the past. We watch as the horrors of the old pizzerias are scanned, digitized, and converted into code, turning real suffering into entertainment. And in that gentle transformation, something else slips through with it. Because William Afton has always been more than a body. His experiments with Remnant, his repeated survivals, and his refusal to accept death suggest a mind clinging to existence with restless determination. When old circuit boards and the hardware are repurposed, when assets from forgotten locations are fed into this new VR project, a fragment of Afton's consciousness appears to ride along, encoded in corrupted files and anomalous routines. It takes on a new form, Glitch Trap, a digital rabbit lurking behind the cheerful facade, waving slowly, inviting waiting. The killer who once stalked service corridors now hides in game menus and test builds, showing us that the fire did not end him. It merely changed the medium. Parallel to this, there is another possible fate for Afton, one that feels almost like a dream of justice. Ultimate Custom Night places him in a tiny office, surrounded by an endless parade of animatronics, attacking again and again in a never-ending loop. Many believe this is his eternal torment, orchestrated by the one you should not have killed. Perhaps the vengeful soul within Golden Freddy, holding him in a private hell of jump scares and failure. While the VR world lets him escape into code, this strange scenario suggests his spirit is also pinned in place, trapped in a cycle he can never win. So Pizzeria Simulator gives us a fire, a farewell, and a sense of closure. But it also leaves deliberate threads trailing outward, from ashes to code, from physical rooms to digital nightmares. The animatronics are gone, yet their data remains. The company falls, yet its brand is quietly revived. The killer dies, yet his influence echoes in software and suffering. As we move forward along this tangled web of a timeline, the horror grows more abstract, less about rusty hinges and more about corrupted files, about how a story refuses to stay buried once it's been told. And in the next stretch of this journey, we will see just how far a ghost can travel when it learns to live inside the machines we trust the most. Unanswered questions, what the flames don't explain, and yet, even as the flames rise and the hardware melts, we're left with shapes in the smoke that never quite resolve, questions that linger in the haunted shadows of this history. We've followed the tangled web of experiments and tragedies to a carefully planned fire, but in these quiet hours, it becomes clear that not everything was meant to be nailed down, labeled, and filed away. We hear Henry's voice speak of the one you should not have killed, and we can trace possibilities like faint constellations. Is it the crying child whose life ended under Fredbear's closing jaws, the innocent boy whose fear defined an era of this timeline? Or is it the vengeful presence behind Golden Freddy, a composite of restless spirits who refuse to forgive? Some read it as Cassidy, some as a nameless child, some as the embodiment of every victim Afton ever tried to forget, and the game never leans close enough to whisper a final answer. The same gentle vagueness surrounds Remnant itself. We watch Afton melt animatronics down, see the fun times and Molten Freddy move with a life that should not be there, hear of metal that remembers pain, but the rules are always just beyond our grasp. Is Remnant a scientific substance, an echo of agony, or a metaphor the series uses for the way trauma lingers, drifting slowly from body to body, machine to machine? Pizzeria Simulator shows us the results, but not the full formula, inviting us to sit with mystery rather than solve an equation. Even the fates of certain characters are left as gentle silhouettes against the firelight. We assume Elizabeth's spirit finds peace as Scrap Baby is consumed. We hope the puppet and the children it guided are finally freed within Lefty's burning shell. And we watch Afton as Scraptrap, pinned again in a blaze meant to end his legacy. But Ultimate Custom Night and later stories suggest his torment continues, that his story echoes in places beyond this restaurant. So the ending here becomes one chapter closing, while another waits quietly in the dark. In this way, Pizzeria Simulator balances closure with uncertainty, giving us a father's last speech, a monster's final trap, and a building designed as a tomb, while still leaving cracks where new tales can seep through. The emotional arc is complete enough to rest in, a haunted world acknowledged, guilt confronted, restless spirits offered release. Yet the details shimmer and shift, like smoke curling above cooling embers. As you drift toward sleep, you don't need to decide which theory is correct, or which child wears which name. You can let the tale wash over you, step by step, and accept that some pieces are meant to float away. And when you wake, if you wish, you can explore your favorite explanations, trace timelines, and revisit clues, or simply let these unanswered questions drift like smoke from the final fire, fading quietly into your next dream. A soft recap, walking back through the empty pizzeria. So now, as those loose theories drift away like smoke, we can quietly turn around and walk back the way we came, step by step, through this long, haunted history. We are not racing toward answers anymore. We are simply drifting slowly through the empty pizzeria of the story we have already told. In the first room, the lights are low over two men at a workbench, Henry, Emily, and William Afton, partners in a small dream. We remember how their company began with friendly mascots and birthday songs. While in the shadows, dangerous springlock suits and a growing hunger for control were already waiting. From Fredbear's family diner to the early Freddy's locations, we saw quiet tragedies unfold. Each new restaurant another attempt to turn innocence into profit, and each failure another crack in the timeline. Further in, we pass the underground halls of sister location, where the dream of family entertainment twisted into laboratories and test chambers. There, the fun-time animatronics learned to lure and capture, and Elizabeth became one with Circus Baby, her bright curiosity trapped inside cold metal. Those same machines would later melt and fuse, their wires and remnant knotting together into Molten Freddy, a tangled web of voices and memories, still reaching for warmth it could never truly feel. In another dim corner of this pizzeria, we see Scrap Baby sitting beneath a flickering light, her clawed hand open like an invitation. She carries the legacy of Circus Baby, Elizabeth's restless spirit wrapped in sharper metal, discarded and rebuilt, always returning. Nearby, Molten Freddy lingers like a whispering mass of cables, the echo of the fun times who once performed below ground. And in the darker booth beyond them, Scraptrap waits. William Afton's ruined body in the withered Springtrap suit, still clinging to existence long after his humanity has burned away. Against one wall, Lefty stands almost peacefully, black fur and a single star on his chest. Built not for parties, but for containment. Inside him, the puppet's gentle, grieving presence remains, the spirit of Henry's daughter who once tried to protect the children and guide their souls. All of them gathered here are more than broken robots. They are the haunted shadows of every choice that led us to this final dining room. And watching over it all, through cassette tapes and calm instructions, is Henry himself, the tired engineer and father behind the voice we know as Cassette Guy. His salvage tapes, so procedural on the surface, become, in hindsight, the careful steps of a man setting his final stage, making sure each restless spirit is in place. When he delivers his last speech, as the fire begins to rise, his words feel like a lullaby and a farewell, accepting his own end so that the children might finally be free. We remember the flames closing in, metal warping, remnant boiling away, Afton's body trapped once more as the building collapses. The children's souls lift and fade, and for a moment, the story seems to end with that single fire. Yet even as this pizzeria goes dark, we know that its legacy continues in digital hauntings, in arcades and VR headsets, where new echoes of Afton and the Mimic will appear. For now, though, we simply walk back through these quiet hours, turning off each light behind us, letting the tale wash over you one last time, until only the faint glow of the next chapter remains ahead, waiting patiently in the dark. Drifting off, after the fire, gentle farewell and next dreams. And as that faint glow ahead waits for another night, we come back to where we are now, in this room, in this moment, with the fire at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria simulator already spent, its last embers settling quietly into ash, its haunted stage finally still. The restaurant has burned, the animatronics are gone. For tonight, this chapter of the timeline is at peace, and the tangled web of remnant and revenge, of quiet tragedies and restless spirits, can loosen its grip and simply rest in the background of your thoughts, like distant lights fading slowly behind a curtain of gentle smoke. If your eyes grew heavy somewhere back with the salvages, or during Henry's final speech, that is perfectly all right. This story was never a test to pass, only something to let the tale wash over you, scene by scene, step by step, until the details blurred into something soft and far away. You may remember Scrap Baby's twisted crown of metal, or the quiet click of a cassette tape beginning to play, or only the feeling of a pizzeria built as a trap, and all of that is enough. You do not have to hold every name, every date, every hidden ending in your mind. If you drifted off while the fire was starting, or woke up just in time to hear that the souls were finally free, the story will still be here when you return, waiting patiently in the haunted shadows of another night, ready to be told again, from the first blueprint to the final flame. And when you wake, if you feel rested, and the memories of this journey through Pizzeria Simulator are still lingering at the edges of your dreams, you are gently invited to leave a quiet trace behind you. You might like the video, or subscribe so that the next chapter in this long history finds its way back to you. Or share in the comments which part of this pizzeria story stayed with you most clearly. Henry's farewell, the last stand of the animatronics, or the moment the fire closed around them all. It is a small thing, but together, it means that this is not just one person listening alone. It is many of us, in many rooms and many countries, drifting slowly off to the same haunted lullaby of flickering lights, security monitors, and distant carnival music, turning a frightening legacy into something quiet and manageable in the dark. So now, let the last embers of that fire fade into complete darkness, and carry only the calm with you, not the fear, into whatever dreams are waiting. The pizzeria is closed, the doors are locked, the spirits are at rest, and we can leave them there for the night. Sleep well, and good night.